could not have anticipated the historic challenges and the tremendous headwinds that the Peach State would face throughout my first term in office. But thanks to the character of our people and the determination of public servants and local heroes in every corner of our state, I believe now more than ever, Georgia's best days are ahead of us.
Brian P. Kemp officially begins his second term as Georgia's 83rd governor during an inauguration ceremony steeped in tradition this morning. Good evening and welcome to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry. This is also day 3 of the 2023 Georgia General Assembly because they held a joint session of the legislature during the inauguration. Among the leadership celebrating the governor's big day, Georgia's first female House Speaker, Jan Jones. She came to the position at a difficult time following the unexpected death of longtime Speaker David Ralston. She then chose not to seek the position full time, and this week she became House Speaker pro tem for the 13th year. I talked with her, and we'll hear that interview later in the show. Joining me in the studio are 2 Democratic lawmakers who will also reflect on the upcoming session. But as always, we start with a look at the day from our Capitol correspondent, Rochelle Ritchie, who was at the inauguration earlier today. Tell us about it.
Yes, very exciting day, Donna. Today, as we've been mentioning, is all about the inauguration of Governor Brian Kemp, the lieutenant governor, and all elected state officials. The expansion of Georgia's economy remained a central focus for the Kemp administration. It's official. Governor Brian Kemp has now begun his second term.
I, Brian Kemp,
do solemnly swear or affirm.
do solemnly swear.
Accompanied by his wife Marty and 3 daughters, Kemp shared how his family's steadfast support has been the foundation of his leadership.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Governor Kemp.
Inauguration Day began at the Cathedral of St. Philip, where a short prayer service was held. The governor and now lieutenant governor's motorcade then headed to Georgia State University's new Convocation Center, where state senators, representatives from the House, including Speaker John Burns, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, and other elected officials, family and friends were in attendance.
We look forward to working with you to continue moving this state forward.
As Kemp and his family made their way down the aisle, his wife and daughter fought joyful tears. Kemp then made it clear that he would be focused on fighting crime, healthcare, and the economy, making 3 promises already to Georgians.
That's why my budget recommendations will propose a $2,000 pay raise for all state employees, including state law enforcement, teachers, pre-K teachers, and certified K-12 personnel. In addition to fully funding our schools once again, my budget will include over $150 million in one-time grant opportunities for local school districts to address school security, learning loss, and help some of our more than 9,000 parapros become fully certified teachers. We will allocate $1.1 billion for a one-time homeowner property tax relief grant.
Kemp swearing in the reason for today's festivities, but not the only celebration, as Burt Jones was sworn in as lieutenant governor.
There's no substitution for hard work when working across the aisle or across the street to help those around you. And let's face it, in smaller communities like where I'm from, the challenges are very similar. Things like access to health care, educational opportunities, transportation needs, good paying jobs are oftentimes limited. The needs of the community become more important than the needs of individuals.
John F. King, also celebrated by the governor, becoming the first Latino American to be sworn in as a state constitutional officer. The celebration continued outside, where the governor reviewed members of the military before walking with his family a quarter of a mile away to the state capitol. Kemp made it clear he is proud of the record-breaking success he had during his first term and plans to continue working for and with all Georgians.
4 years ago, I made this promise to the people of our great state. Whether you voted for me or not, I was going to work hard every day to put you and your families first. And while a lot has changed, and once-in-a-lifetime events have tested all of us, my commitment to the people of this state has not wavered.
And the governor also set a hefty goal of making Georgia the largest electric mobility capital in the country. That is my Capitol Report. Donna, back to you.
And he looks well on his way to trying to make that happen.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Rochelle.
Thank you.
We're now going to focus on the General Assembly and the woman who made Georgia history a few months ago when she became Madam Speaker of the Georgia House, a first in Georgia. Sadly, she came into the role after losing her good friend, the late Speaker David Ralston, and a man she considered a brother. Earlier this week, the bipartisan Women's Legislative Caucus honored Jones for, quote, breaking barriers for women and girls in Georgia and her steady leadership. I started our conversation by asking her about that recognition.
Well, it meant a lot, and not just to me, but you know, the circumstances of me being briefly Speaker for 2 months were tragic and completely unexpected when Speaker Ralston, after 13 years as Speaker, passed away. But it was important to me once I decided that I would not run to be Speaker with the new term, but would remain or run for pro tem, that I do all that I could to make it a smooth transition for the members of the House who represent all of Georgia, and the new Speaker, Speaker Burns, who's going to do an awesome job. But the Women's Caucus had a lovely celebration in honor of me being, and it really was more than about me. It was about the role I took on as being the first female Speaker. And the 4 women that spoke, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, all shared how important this is for young girls and women to realize that all roles are open to their aspirations or should be open to them, and that this in some way, I hope, inspires some of them.
It's historic for Georgia. What feelings do you have about that?
Well, I felt that way somewhat, frankly, when I was elected pro tem 13 years ago. I was the first woman to ever preside. And because a pro tem presides when the Speaker is unable to, and I certainly aspired myself to conduct myself in such a way that it reflected well on other women and for young girls who might aspire, whether it's to be Speaker or Congresswoman or CEO of their own company or a large corporation, that I would serve as an example for them as well.
You've seen the changes over the years with more women coming in. Yeah. What difference has that made here in this building? Well,
I think more than anything, it communicates to Georgia that we really do reflect them in every sense of the word. You know, the one that's most obvious is geographic, because you know, separate from being a female, none of us are neighbors right next door to each other. We all live within our own district. And so most of the time, I think most issues I find are geographic based. You know, what does Metro Atlanta need, or Southwest Georgia? And another layer on that, though, is you know, female, male. We have a growing, more diverse state, and it's certainly evident in those that are elected, and that's a good thing, that we do and should reflect the people back home.
And you've always felt welcome as a woman in this body?
Yeah, I really have. I've never. You know, I do think you have to be a strong woman, you know, you have to hold your own, but I would say that's true of a male too down here. But I have not felt held back because I'm a female.
I want to talk about the fact that you came in at the same time as Speaker David Ralston. He wasn't Speaker at the time, of course,
right.
but you both came in
That's
to
right.
the General Assembly at the same time. Talk about that journey for the two of you and then moving up in leadership.
Yes, so we worked together for 20 years and came in together after redistricting in 2003. And after, I guess it was 2 years when Republicans took control, he became a chairman, and so did I. And we worked together as equal colleagues. In 2010, when there was a change in the speaker, and the speaker and the pro tem retired. He ran for speaker and prevailed. I ran for pro tem and prevailed. And we really, kind of worked hand in hand. I thought of him as my friend and really in many respects like a brother. That we came from different parts of the state, but I always felt that he welcomed my perspective, and I appreciated that in him.
It's quite a journey for the two of you together, and so I know it's been pretty bittersweet coming back in this building.
It has been.
This week. You've got to move on, though, and I think the last 2 days have shown us that there's a smooth transition with you and Speaker Burns. Let's talk about where we move from now. From here in terms of priorities. What are some of the things?
Well, and Speaker Burns will have his priorities. I'm so looking forward to working with him in his new role. He was the first person to nominate me for Speaker Pro Tem 14 sessions ago now. And so he's a good man. He's going to do a good job. And that was why I was happy to support him in this role. And in the election. I think we're gonna build on what we've been doing. It's very simple. It's certainly in my area, and I think all over the state, people care about good schools, good educational opportunities. They want good jobs, and they want safe communities. And almost every issue can be filtered or can be sorted and sifted into one of those three categories. Good schools, I anticipate that we'll build on some of the mental health achievements of the last couple years with the leadership of Speaker Ralston. And I think you'll see even more support from more counselors in the schools. More opportunities for students who are at risk of dropping out so that they have more options while they're, in public school to complete and get their high school degree and become a part of this workforce issue that we have, where we don't have enough trained workforce. And so we need to, frankly, I don't think we've done a really good job in that category, and we need to enhance that and boost it up. And some of us in the House are working very diligently on that issue, and you'll learn more about that in the next week. But with regards to safe communities, we've certainly made progress there, but we need to double down on supporting our law enforcement with additional judges, which then means more DAs, assistant DAs, boost the crime labs, so that give them the tools so that they can keep our communities safe.
House Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones. Coming up, some of the thoughts about the governor's inauguration from two Democrats, including one who spent her first week as a new legislator.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
Here's what's new this month with Passport.
You make a good team.
As long as we're together, it's perfect.
Things do come through. Hey, lad?
Seems they do.
Something deeply dangerous is happening here. This is just beginning.
The news, and all your favorite shows are available with Passport. Support your PBS station and stream more with Passport on the PBS app.
My heart is racing right now.
Fasten your seatbelt. This season we have 21 incredible guests.
It's wild.
It's really something. And there are so many highlights. I feel like a time traveler.
You're uncovering the truth.
These are consequential things.
Yeah.
Mind blown. What do you have? Spies working for you? How did you find this?
Oh, look at everybody.
You have a DNA cousin.
Oh my God!
That's Bill Hader. You know him?
Of course.
I wish my mom could be here to see this.
What?
That's very moving, actually.
Your ancestors came on the Mayflower.
I've got history. I feel the presence of all these people.
What a treasure. Those are some of the incredible stories of the new season of Finding Your Roots.
Tuesday on GPB.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. Joining me to talk about several issues are Democratic State Representative Terry Anulewicz of Smyrna, who was first elected by her district in 2017, and Democratic State Senator Nabila Islam of Lawrenceville, who is brand new to the Georgia General Assembly. Welcome to you both to Lawmakers. This is easy, I promise. Your week has been tough. This is the easy part. I want to start by asking you both. You both attended the inauguration today.
Yes.
And I'd like to get your thoughts. And I'll start with you, Representative Anulewicz.
I was at the inauguration 4 years ago, and one of the things I noticed about this inauguration is this was definitely a second-term inauguration, and by which I mean the rhetoric was of unity. What I heard was rhetoric that was much more geared towards, I think, unity and moving forward, addressing the challenges that we know are going to face Georgia, but it was not as divisive as I feel like it was 4 years ago, and certainly not as divisive as it was in the campaign trail.
Yeah, I remember 4 years ago that he was coming off of the campaign with Stacey Abrams, where she still hadn't totally conceded, so things are a little different.
Right, and he was coming in hot to that session. I mean, that's the session that we had the HB 481, the heartbeat bill, which no one expected to come during the first year of a first term. I think that this year we're going to hear, and the next 4 years, we're going to hear a lot more talk about the economy, about nuts and bolts, about, we've heard a lot of talk about public safety. Speaker Pro Tem Jones mentioned public safety. It's important to note that everyone wants to live in a safe community. And I think that that's somewhere where I think we're going to have some very good discussions about the best ways to move forward, because everyone does want to live in a safe community. Everyone deserves to live in a safe community. And I think those are going to be some very robust conversations that we have.
Okay, Senator Islam, your thoughts on what you heard today?
Oh, definitely. So this was my attending my first swearing-in ceremony for the governor, and I actually liked the fact that he talked about putting real people over politics. And your first term, I feel like you're jockeying to make sure that you have legislation that'll help you win your re-election. And now that he's in his second term, I'm really hoping to see he leans into that and actually focuses on good-paying jobs and fully funding public education. I was pleased to hear the $2,000 raise for teachers and state workers. So that was great. And so I was pleased by a lot of things that he said, and also the diversity on the stage as well.
Yeah, so we had the first Asian American justice, Supreme Court justice, who swore him in. So that was interesting. What didn't he talk about that you wish he had touched on?
I am a former municipal person. I was on the Smyrna City Council for 10 years. I want to know more about the property tax rebate. He went into it a little bit at Eggs and Issues yesterday. It was mentioned several times on the campaign trail, particularly towards the end of the campaign. And I am not opposed at all to returning taxpayer money to taxpayers. I think there are a lot of things we need to talk about funding, and that's going to happen next week during budget week. But I, as a municipal person, I want to know, how are the cities going to be made whole? Is there going to be a formula to determine how cities get their share of property taxes that they would normally use to pay for their infrastructure, to pay for their public safety, to pay for all the things that cities tend to do. And so I would like more details on what exactly that legislation is going to look like.
Yeah, $1.1 billion, he said, in property
Right,
tax.
and one concern I have is that, because this is a one-time, it is a one-time that'll be done by the governor and the General Assembly, and I want to make sure the messaging on that is done in a very thoughtful way so that a year from that rebate, you don't have a lot of taxpayers who are very angry at their local elected officials, their county commissioners or city council members for raising their taxes.
Yeah, so they understand where it came from.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what about for you? I know Medicaid expansion is one of your areas. Anything else, before we get into that, anything else you wanted to hear?
Well, I mean, to just go back to Medicaid expansion, I think healthcare access in this state is dire. We're a handful of states that have yet to expand Medicaid, and I believe healthcare is a human right, and I would have loved to heard more about how we were going to be able to get healthcare for low-income folks in this state that have been locked out because we haven't expanded Medicaid.
Yeah, he didn't talk about healthcare at all.
Right, which is extremely important. So
yeah, so if it's one of your priorities, tell us what you're interested in seeing happen.
I would love to see more of a conversation about expanding Medicaid in the state, because I know that there are a lot of Republicans as well that are getting tired of not expanding Medicaid and bringing these dollars that we need to the state in order to get folks healthcare access. And so we would see about 500,000 people would be able to go see a doctor that otherwise can't right now. And so also it would help with hospital funding in rural areas, it would keep hospitals open and jobs as well. So it's good for the economy, it's good for people's health. And I think, if Mike Pence can expand Medicaid, why can't Brian Kemp? So.
Interesting that we heard a little bit from him in this inauguration speech, but he still has his state of the state. So there's still some things that he could talk about. I know that jobs that he talked about jobs, but I know that last year you were able to pass a bill, bipartisan, that dealt with jobs in a different way. Talk about that a little bit.
Yes, so last year we passed legislation that expanded sexual harassment protections and gave a right of action to city and county workers. State employees already have these protections, but now city and county workers have these protections for sexual harassment. And one of the things that's notable about that legislation is that was actually the first time that a definition of sexual harassment was put into the Georgia Code. So that is something that I'm very proud of and very grateful for all of the support that I had, particularly from, he was then Judiciary Chairman Chuck Efstration, now he's Majority Leader Chuck Efstration, and he had worked with former Representative B. Wynn for a couple of years in crafting that legislation. So the goal now for this year, and I'm still working with advocates and also with the business community, it's critical to have every voice that legislation would impact at the table, because that's, I think, pragmatically the best way to move legislation, especially when one is in the minority party in Georgia. But we are working on legislation that would expand more workplace harassment, not just sexual harassment, but a variety of workplace harassment protections to workers in Georgia in the private sector.
Give us an example.
So, for example, gender identity harassment, or if you are pregnancy harassment is something that has been part of the legislation in the past. People, and I actually have a Republican colleague who tells a very compelling story about how his mother lost her job when she was pregnant with him because she was pregnant with him. And I know that there is going to be a lot of legislation that talks about protections for pregnant workers, but we're going to be talking about protections for workers who, if they are harassed because of their race, for example. And there are federal protections that exist. That is correct, and that's something that people often say, we don't need these, we have federal protections. And that's true, they're there. In Georgia, and the federal courts here in Georgia, it is very, very difficult to bring a case forward so that your case is actually heard. And so, I feel very strongly, and I know I'm not alone in this, and thinking that we need to, if Georgia's gonna be the #1 place to do business, we need to make sure it is also the #1 place to work.
Yeah, and so when we talk about jobs, and he did today, you talk about one issue, you have another issue you care about, and that is raising the minimum wage. Talk about that a little bit.
So I grew up in a working class family, and my mom was an order puller at a warehouse, my dad a file clerk. So I've been around a lot of folks that have worked hourly on the job, and we need to increase the minimum wage to a living wage. By not doing so, we're mandating poverty. The state of Georgia would be mandating poverty by not increasing it. I believe we need to increase it to $15 an hour and peg it to inflation thereafter. But working people, like over 60% of working people in this country live paycheck to paycheck. And now more than ever, with the cost of everything increasing, you know what's not increasing? Our wages. So I believe we need to increase the minimum wage to a living wage, and make sure we get more money back in the pockets of working people, which would also stimulate the local economy as well.
Yeah, so the governor talked about this $2,000 for state workers. The key is seeing whether or not the business community actually follows through also and tries to do something, I guess.
And it's to their benefit. I mean, from the state of Georgia to a fast food restaurant, you know, whatever sector you're in, there are a lot of problems that employers have attracting and retaining employees. I mean, that's why the governor announced those raises today for state employees. Retention is unbelievably important, and that will absolutely help it will help employers in the long run, because turnover is very expensive for business owners.
It's one thing to talk about all the jobs coming in. It's another thing to make sure that workers get what they feel they deserve for those jobs.
Workers should be paid dignified wages.
Yeah. Let's talk about another issue for you, and that's DACA, and how you feel about right now we are. Tell us where we are with DACA, because Georgia, every year we talk about this down at the General Assembly, and it hasn't really moved anywhere.
So, I mean, I grew up in Gwinnett County, and I went to school with a lot of undocumented students. I went to Central Gwinnett High School in Lawrenceville, and these folks are just as American as I am. And, you know, while I would graduate from high school, I would see a lot of my friends that were undocumented not be able to go to college. Right now, we have a deficit of workers. Now, I think we ought to extend in-state tuition to DACA recipients, undocumented folks in the state, and allow them to stay and attend public universities. And I think that would help resolve a lot of our lack of folks in our workforce. And so I think that's something that we really need to look at. And I think the number one thing for economic development in the state that we could be doing is investing in our education.
Yeah, so another workforce issue, and when we're talking about more jobs coming into the state and a low unemployment rate in Georgia.
That's right. And, you know, at Eggs and Issues yesterday, everyone who spoke on behalf of the Georgia Chamber was very clear that their number one issue is workforce and workforce development. They didn't say their number one issue was any of the culture war issues that you hear people talking about. They didn't list any issue that people might say is a big dividing issue. It's workforce, workforce, workforce. And my Republican colleague in the House, Casey Carpenter, has been an outspoken advocate for in-state tuition for DACA students. And I think we'll see more of that. I think that he's going to continue with that in the House, and I know that he is going to have a lot of allies on the Democratic side of the aisle.
You didn't hear the governor talk about culture war issues, so maybe we won't hear it, and it's not an election year, so we may not hear much about it. I am curious about your first week. What did you think?
Well, I'm taking it all in. So, you know, we're on our third day. A lot to celebrate, right? And overall, I've just been watching and learning and observing. I actually was a legislative aide in 2011 for Chairman Don Parsons on the House side. So it's not my first time, but I've been able to retain a lot of those friendships from all those years ago. And so it's nice to see some familiar faces. And also just to get to work and to be a bold voice for my district as well.
And for you, does it feel different this year?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is. Those every 4 years, those inaugural years are very different. And my first session, I was a midterm. I came in midterm, and I was elected in 2017. So 2018, which was the second half of that biennial, was my first session. And that's kind of hit the ground running. This is more of a hurry up and wait, and in the meantime, you're going to go to a lot of parties.
Yes. A lot of parties.
A lot of parties.
A lot of parties.
I like a party. That's good.
Well, you've got the hearings next week, too.
And we do have appropriations hearings.
I'm so glad that you were both here to talk with me today, and I hope you'll come back. And good luck on this session. So that does it for Lawmakers Today. Tomorrow is day 4 of the session, no Lawmakers show, but look for the Lawmakers Capital Report at the end of the PBS NewsHour. Next week, the Georgia General Assembly, as we said, not meeting formally in the chambers so that members can attend the budget hearings. We will return with Lawmakers on Monday, January 23rd for legislative day 5. Have a good night.